Joining me now with reaction, former Speaker of the House, former presidential candidate Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, you've been urging Republicans to engage. Is this engagement?
This is a terrific performance of leadership, of courage, of stamina, of determination on the part of Senator Rand Paul. He performed two very important services. First, on the immediate question, he got the administration to admit that the president really doesn't have the authority to kill Americans outside of combat in the United States. So it's a very important thing to put to rest. And if there's any doubt about it left, Congress should pass a law making it definitive. Clearly, as Commander-in-Chief, at a moment of national crisis, he could authorize something in order to avoid a disaster. But short of that, the bias should be overwhelmingly in favor of protecting the legal rights of American citizens. Second, though, Rand Paul gave us a case study in what courageous, energetic leadership can be that every member could exercise, both in the House and the Senate. You don't have to wait around for groupthink and the leadership to tell you what to do. You can get up and you can change things. And I was very pleased last night that Mitch McConnell, late in this long filibuster, came to the floor as the leader to commend his colleague from Kentucky. I thought it was exactly the right gesture. I think we need more Rand Pauls. We need more people willing to get up and do what they think is right. And I think that we would be a lot further down the road towards hemming in this president if we had more people willing to do that.
There were four stars that are emerging. And I remember this young, kind of bold, brash congressman from Georgia who had a series that he put together called Renewing American Civilization, which ultimately led to Republicans taking over the Congress for the first time in 40 years. But between Rand and Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, Ron Johnson, Tim Scott of South Carolina, all participated last night. I think we've got a young, dynamic block of conservatives that are showing not only that they'll stand up for what's good for the country, but it seems to me that that's good for them politically as well. Is there some... The old guard has something to learn here. Yeah.
Look, Sean, much more important than politics. I hope the House and Senate leadership in the Republican Party will take a lesson from yesterday. I hope they will encourage the Rand Pauls, encourage the Mike Burgesses, for example, in the House, or the Louis Gohmerts. Encourage the people who are willing to get up and take a risk and do something. They're not always going to be right, but their willingness to fight for what they believe in really is what makes a difference in once again creating a grassroots movement that can take this country back and move us back to a constitutional republic.
Yeah, and he did talk about shredding the Constitution. The original letter from Eric Holder to Rand Paul left the door wide open. If an emergency arises, I'll examine the particular facts and circumstances before advising the president. He wouldn't say unequivocally no. I was pretty disappointed in John McCain. I want to show you that John McCain didn't excoriate Eric Holder. He went after Rand Paul. Watch this.
I don't think that what happened yesterday is helpful to the American people. To allege that the United States of America, our government, would drop a drone Hellfire missile on Jane Fonda, that brings the conversation from a serious discussion about U.S. policy to the realm of the ridiculous.
Very misguided to me. He should have been questioning Eric Holder and why Eric Holder didn't say flatly what he eventually said today. No. The answer is no, you can't do it.
Well, what I find sad about Senator McCain's recent comments, both to Ted Cruz, when Ted Cruz was frankly raising legitimate questions, and again yesterday with Rand Paul, is, when I first knew John McCain in the House, he was a maverick. In the Senate for years, he was a maverick. Of everybody I know in the Senate, I don't know anybody who had a better record of bucking the leadership, doing what he thought mattered, marching to his own drummer. And I think that it's unfortunate, but I think, frankly, it doesn't hurt Ted Cruz, and it doesn't hurt Rand Paul. It hurts John McCain. The country's moving on. We're in a new era. People know that these are legitimate questions. And as you pointed out, when the Attorney General sends a letter up that implies the president has the right to kill Americans who are not engaged in combat, this is a very important distinction. If you're an American and you're engaged in fighting the United States, you're engaged in an act of treason. The president as commander-in-chief has every right to target you, as he did an American in Yemen, I think 2 years ago. But if you're an American who might be vaguely, indirectly engaged in something, and then you have not been proven in a court of law, you're not an active combatant, you have every right to be protected under our Constitution, or the Constitution has no meaning.
You know, do you feel, and I'll tell you, the emails came flying in. Twitter was going nuts. I felt a momentum shift between, and we'll talk about this in the next segment, about sequestration, the president overreaching, his apocalyptic talk, between that and Rand Paul. I just felt a shift. You can feel it. Did you feel that?
I just wrote a newsletter at gingrichproductions.com entitled Pioneers of the Future versus Prisoners of the Past. I think you just described a situation where you clearly have Rand Paul and others who are the pioneers of the future, and unfortunately you have some former leaders who have become prisoners of the past in a way that becomes really pretty embarrassingly obvious in some of these exchanges.
All right. Well,
when you're cutting $85 billion in 7 months, which represents over a 10% cut in the defense budget in 7 months, there's no smart way to do that. There's no smart way to do that. You don't want to have to choose between, let's see, do I close funding for the disabled kid or the poor kid? Do I close this Navy shipyard or some other one?
Demagoguing by the president. Choose between the disabled kid, the poor kid. What about Mohammed Morsi, the 9/11 truther who thinks the Israelis are the descendants of apes and pigs? I choose we don't give him money. We give it to the poor children and we give it to the disabled children. So we have another post-sequester day, and we have more proof yet that the White House is overinflating the effects of the cuts. According to ABC News, the canceling of public tours at the White House because of the sequester is saving the country. Ready for this? $18,000 a week just to kind of cut to make a dent in that $16.5+ trillion debt. Not even close. Now, perhaps the most best example we have comes from a hearing on Tuesday. This is great. When Congressman Andy Harris took to the CDC director, he took him to task over the bogus claim that the sequester is affecting vaccine supplies to the children in Maryland. Watch this hysterical exchange.
What did the president's budget do to 317? The president's prospective budget for 2013?
The precise numbers I would have to get back to.
Does 58 million cut sound familiar?
Yes.
And what was the sequester cut?
Again, the precise.
Does 30 million sound familiar?
I would.
You think that's around the ballpark, isn't it? So actually, the president cut the program twice as much in his budget. Can I assume that the president's proposed cut would have reduced funding to 4,100 children in Maryland?
As per the justification that was published with that, we've looked at ways that we can run the program more efficiently by helping state and local health departments recoup dollars, for example, for insured patients.
And you can't do that under a sequester, but you can do it under the president's budget? So the president's cut of $58 million to the 317 program, you think you could get around that to avoid cutting vaccines to children, but under a sequester that the president blames on Republicans, you don't know if you can do that?
We're going to do everything we can to limit any damage that occurs because of the across-the-board cut, but it reduces our flexibility significantly.
Is it your testimony that under the president's proposed cut of $58 million in his budget to the 317 program, you could have avoided cuts to vaccines to children in Maryland?
We believe that we could have maintained vaccination levels, yes.
Very interesting.
Checkmate. Still with us. Former Speaker of the House, former presidential candidate Newt Gingrich. I mean, just embarrassed. They've been busted. Let's see. They've been busted about firing janitors, about immunizations for kids, about the education department and firing teachers and pink slips being sent out. I mean, the president just lied repeatedly, demagogued this whole thing, and then it's backfired. Your reaction?
Well, I think it has backfired. I think it also draws into sharp contrast for any American willing to look at the facts that you could have an American people's sequester applying common sense, flexibility, making choices. and you would save the money with dramatically less difficulty than this totally absurd Obama model, which maximizes rigidity and maximizes pain. I mean, for one thing, it's embarrassing to say this, but this president has been consistently dishonest in a way which absolutely undermines his ability to lead, because almost everything they've told us about the sequester has either been totally false or grossly exaggerated. Second, they're not using any cleverness. You could raise the money to pay for keeping the White House tours open, and nobody would notice it. Or the president, for just not going golfing that one weekend, a point that Congressman Louis Gohmert has made, just that one weekend would have paid for something like 50 weeks of White House tours.
Well, it's interesting you say that. I'm going to show you two shots. One of these kids, first of all, how embarrassing to the rest of the world that we had to shut down the White House because we can't afford to pay for it, because the president wants to inflict the maximum impact so the American people will feel it. Listen to the children begging to get into the White House. Watch this.
How big a deal is it to be able to go to the White House?
It's very important. They'll remember it for the rest of their lives. And unfortunately, they might remember that this was a sign of their government if they couldn't get to go.
The White House is our house. Please let us visit.
All right, so they all want to go. My friend and colleague at the 5, Eric Bolling, I was watching the 5 today, comes up with a brilliant idea. Absolutely brilliant. Let's roll tape.
I'll make you a deal, Mr. President. Jay Carney, grab your pencil. Let these families take their White House tours next week, and I'll cover the added expenses. Word is it'll cost around $74,000. If I can get the White House doors open, I'll pick up the tab. Mr. Carney, you know this is an offer you can't refuse. Give me a call.
He said he'd pick up the tab for a week. By the way, I think it's $18,000. I'm not sure we got this. Well, regardless, I saw that and I said, okay, I'm going to follow Eric's lead. I'll pay for a week, too. I tweeted it out during the 5. And so now we've got 2 weeks covered. If the president wants to play games like this, we can play games back.
Well, let me say, first of all, ironically, my grandson, Robert, who you know, he and his class went to the White House tour about 3 weeks ago. They loved it. They made them feel very patriotic. They're 5th graders, and they really had just a wonderful experience. John Boehner organized the House budget so that the Capitol Visitor Center staying open. They made choices, and they were able to find a way to serve the American people before serving the bureaucracy. What the president's doing is an absurdity, and people need to understand. A president who adopts maximum pain for political gain as a deliberate strategy is really undermining faith in the presidency and really, I think, losing any credibility to be the leader of the United States.
He's being petulant and immature. You know something? We'll spend, Mr. Speaker, more money this year than we spent last year. Everyone keeps talking about cuts. There is no real cuts unless you're using one of those faulty, ridiculous, insane calculators that only exist in Washington, D.C. You know, reductions and increases, as you know, that's not a cut in the real world.
Well,
I live in the real world.
The president said he didn't want to choose. Then why did he run for president? To lead is to choose. And I think that's something we need to remind ourselves as we watch Obama failing.
All right, Mr. Speaker, good to see you. And I know you broke your old Washington calculator when you left. Appreciate you being with us.